This is part 5 of the David Michael Crawford serial arson case on Crime to Burn. We've discussed 7 of the 12 fires Crawford was accused of committing. We've discussed a 4-year period of illegal activities and threats endured by his own daughter for which she is convinced her father is responsible. We've discussed that Crawford's phone contained a list of his alleged victims. However, there are 5 more names on the list that we haven't discussed yet, and I have to tell you, one of them is a celebrity of sorts. There's a mountain of evidence that police collected, there's a courtroom full of emotional testimony, and there's an appeal pending right now in September of 2024. But before we can even consider the grounds for appeal, we need to uncover the evidence that police used to indict and convict Crawford, and we have some new information to share with you that just came to our attention this week. So join us right now on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes and bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer and former firefighter.
And I am the Dimega of a false reality.
We'd like to thank each and every listener, and we humbly request that if you haven't had a chance to do so, that you go and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. It would go a long way to help us grow. In addition, I'm active on Instagram, X, and Facebook, and we hope you'll follow us there. And when you see content from us, that you will share it, comment on it, like it, give us those little hearts and thumbs up. Because I need validation. Because it helps us to be seen by a wider audience. If you have constructive feedback, we'd love the opportunity to address your concerns if you'll send that feedback through DM on one of our social media platforms or to us at crimetoburn@gmail.com. Before you leave a negative review, it would be greatly appreciated. And finally, we hope that you enjoy this podcast enough to tell your friends. Now, this has been a big week for us. We've received several emails from people that knew Dave Crawford and some people that have insider knowledge of some of the accusations that we've discussed. So far, they've all requested to stay off the record, but they have been able to provide me with a lot of additional information that I've done my best to corroborate so that I can share it with you. So before we continue with the list that appeared in Dave Crawford's phone of his alleged victims, we're going to revisit some of the allegations from our previous episodes in more detail because I now have new information. Now, some of this new information is from sources that have reached out to me. Some of it is from public records requests that I finally got responses on. But I also want to reiterate that I cannot talk to any of the witnesses in this case because the case is pending appeal, so none of my news sources are witnesses. But I have been able to verify the people are who they say they are, and I've been able to corroborate a lot of the information I've been given. First, I need to make a correction. I said Mark Kratzer. He was the one that hosted the pool party after Scott Crawford's pool burned. I said he was David's stepbrother, and that is actually what they said in court, but he is actually David's half-brother. They have the same mom. Now, Mark didn't have a fire, but he was on this hit list of David's that I brought up last week. This was a list that was a coded list in Dave's iPhone that included the names of each of the victims of his alleged fires, plus 2 additional names. One of those 2 additional names was Mark Kratzer. They were reportedly estranged at the time, but there is evidence that police allege indicates that Mark was about to be a victim of an arson committed by Crawford, and we're going to be getting to that evidence in this episode, but first I wanted to clear up that family relationship. Now, multiple people reached out to me this week, and none of them knew that other people were also reaching out to me, as far as I know, unless they were colluding outside of talking to me.
Conspiracy.
I have not told any of my sources who any of my other sources are, or even that I had other sources. They're finding out that I had other sources probably right now with you as they listen. Now, the reason I didn't tell anyone that multiple people had reached out was because this gave me an interesting opportunity to be able to independently corroborate information. So if 2 sources give me the same information, and one at least of those sources either would have had a completely different type of access to Crawford in the case, then I can say that there's a high likelihood that that's factual information. However, there was cases where people that had similar rumors that they heard about things, where I felt like I had a bigger duty to try to corroborate that information, or at least present it as rumor.
How big was your duty?
My duty was huge.
Sorry, that's what I do, damn.
I was not able to corroborate every piece of information that I was given. However, in some cases, I was able to corroborate enough of the facts from a source that made me feel like the information they were giving me could be more reliable. So I am going to tell you as we go through this what I was able to corroborate and what is rumor. So we're going to be discussing some hearsay, but that's okay because I'm not a court of law. And hearsay is admissible in podcasts, even though it's not admissible in court. And if it's not corroborated information, but I feel like it's reliable, I will tell you the information, but I'll indicate that I wasn't able to corroborate it. Some of the information I was given this week, I was also able to corroborate through new records that I was able to obtain this week. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be presenting that information to the best of my ability. And in addition to all of my new friends, thank you to each and every person that has reached out this week. I was finally able to get a hold of police reports related to the harassment that Carrie alleged against her father. So we're going to start with a quick run through of the timeline of that harassment and what occurred, because what I noticed is there's going to be some patterns that emerge that are going to directly relate to the arson case. We're going all the way back to August 29th, 2008.
Oh, to the dewy slopes of...
To the dewy slopes. So this is right after Carrie and Ray moved from York to her mother's house in Odenton. So Carrie, Ray, Carrie's mom, and her stepdad are all living in one house together in Odenton, and while the family is inside asleep, somebody shoots up the house. Now, based on the police report that I have, at least one bullet was found inside the house. However, the house was shot several times. And so they know it was a 9mm gun that was fired at the house. And this is the incident where an empty gas can was left on top of the car that Ray was driving.
So, at this point, were the York boys still active, or were they just winding down, or...
Well, there was only one incident that we know of.
I'm very concerned about the York boys. I feel like this might be the next satanic panic.
It's not. One of the people that I was able to talk to this week suggested to me that it's their theory that the York boys was made up by police.
No way.
I know. That was your theory also.
No, the Z makes it totally legit. In my mind, anyway. I don't know about the listeners, but when you add a Z to something, that's like adding an exclamation point and then a period. Like, that's exclamation point, the end.
Okay, well, the incident that occurred before Carrie and Ray moved to Odenton, that was where police first alleged that maybe the York boys had something to do with it.
Can I join the York boys? Is there like an application?
They don't optimize their Google searches, so I wasn't able to find joining information.
This is unfortunate. This goes back to the criminal management thing that we keep talking about.
Yeah. This is the incident where the gas can was left on top of the car that Ray was driving, and the police report actually says that Ray reported that it smelled like somebody had actually poured gasoline over his car. It's not an unreasonable theory.
Yeah, that's not a tremendous leap, is it?
No. Now, this police report does indicate that the York boys are suspects, because the only incident of harassment we have before this was in York, Pennsylvania, when the police blamed the York boys.
I'm curious, is there a dossier on the York boys? Are there photographs or mugshots or...
I told you all the information I was able to dig up on the York boys last week. I have no new information on them.
They are elusive.
Yeah.
I stand in awe.
Alright, so that was in August of 2008. Now a couple months later, in October of 2008, Carrie's stepdad leaves the house and he finds a gas can with the cloth in it in the nozzle. Now, I reported last week that the gas can was full, but it was not. It was only about a quarter full. And while it didn't smell like anyone had doused the car, the police report specifically notes that it had been heavily raining. And so they think that even if somebody had doused the car, they don't know how long ago it was, and that the rain may have washed away.
That was supposed to be a gift. And now it's what?
Now it's only a little bit of a can of gasoline.
No, it's barely a pittance.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed.
Things really started heating up in February of 2009. This is when somebody fires a rifle outside Carrie's mother's new residence. So the house that they had lived in when the earlier shooting happened, they have now vacated. They've moved to a new residence. Carrie and Ray no longer live with them in this new residence. and this is a multifamily dwelling. So police come to investigate, and they find that somebody's fired a .30 caliber round that penetrated a garage door and a cabinet and became lodged in a toolbox.
7.62 by 39 or 7.62 by 35?
You're asking the wrong person.
Sorry.
Now, the bullet apparently grazed a car that was sitting outside at the time that the shooting happened. Now, this garage was not Carrie's mother and stepfather's garage. It was somebody completely unrelated. But on the same day, when Carrie's stepfather went to leave for work, he found a Ziploc bag on his windshield that had a newspaper clipping inside. This was the note that we talked about that said, "You're easy to follow, Carrie and Ray, this is not over." But the note also had additional information in it that we didn't learn from the press report. According to the police report, the note also contained the names of the street where the first shooting had occurred, as well as an acronym for the name of the facility where Carrie's mom was working at the time, and the name of their new community, sort of like as if the person was trying to say that they know their movements all along. They've known their movements all along.
Creepy.
However, Carrie's stepdad didn't call and report this to the police that day. In fact, he didn't call and report it to police until days later, after he found out that on the same day, another neighbor had called the police because of the bullet that went through their garage. Now, he told police the reason he hadn't reported it was because his wife had been so worried after the earlier shooting, and it was just a piece of paper taped to his car, and so he didn't really think it was that big of a deal and didn't want to worry his wife. But when he realized it happened the same day as the shooting, he realized they're probably connected. So, police investigating these two together now determined that if somebody had been firing from the street toward the area where Carrie's stepdad's car had been parked and missed, the bullet would have penetrated the garage door in the same trajectory as they found that the bullet had actually passed. So they think that this was actually targeting Carrie's stepfather's car, but the shooter missed, and so it went into an innocent bystander's garage.
He missed a whole car?
A whole car.
Was it a sedan or was it a coupe?
I don't know. I can go back to the police report and probably tell you, but I didn't think it was that important. So police determine that it's their theory somebody was firing towards Carrie's stepfather's car, missed, the bullet goes into the garage. This is all one incident. That was February. 10 days later, at the same multifamily dwelling where Carrie's mother and stepfather are living, somebody spray paints two words. One of the words is the last name of Carrie's mother, which I'm not going to say on the podcast because even though it's public record, I don't know, I feel like I need to protect her. And the other name that they spray painted was Ray, which we know is the first name of Carrie's ex-husband. Next to the spray painted words is a clear plastic container containing gasoline. And next to that is a Ziploc bag. And in the bag is a note, and a white van nearby is also spray painted with the word Ray in black spray paint, and a garage door in close proximity to where the bottle and note were found were spray painted with Carrie's mom's last name. Now, this is the first time that any of these police reports mention David Crawford, but it only mentions him in that he is Carrie's dad and he's the chief of police in Laurel, and that they have spoken to him and he's apparently assisting in the investigation in any way he can. Mm-hmm. Now, a month later, on March 12th of 2010, there's another shooting. This time shots are fired into the door of the building where Carrie's mom and stepdad live, and a note was left addressed to Carrie's mom, and it said, "How's the family?" on the envelope. And inside was a note that said, "Carrie, I'm out. I'm back. I have found you. York boys."
What?
In this police report...
Wait. How is I'm York boys?
We've already discussed the poor grammar. We know... Wait till you hear the next note.
I didn't know if that
it's
meant
gonna
like
go downhill.
it was like the Legion demon, like we are many.
I don't know.
Fear us. We are the thing that causes you pain. Kneel down.
In this police report, they document that Carrie tells police that she believes at this point that her dad is responsible for this incident because she had recently filed paperwork in the custody case. And in this report, the police list David Crawford officially as a suspect. Now, this is important because this occurred in March of 2010. And in March of 2010, David Crawford was still the Laurel police chief. So he is a suspect in a shooting investigation while he is the police chief.
Timelines are important.
Now, the same day that this shooting happened, there's also a shooting at that gym near where Carrie's mom lives. And at first I was like, we can't really know for sure that those are related because Carrie didn't work at that gym. And we just had Carrie's theory that her dad just knew she worked at a gym and made a guess. But the police report clears it up. There's no question these are related because the perpetrator left a note addressed to Carrie Truelove taped to the gym door. And the note said, Carrie, go to see you again. How's the family, York boys?
Was there a heart?
No heart that I'm aware of. So that was in March. Now, nothing occurs.
Did it smell like perfume?
I didn't ask. It didn't say. I only have the information that was provided to me. I didn't get to interview anyone. So that was in March. And then we fast forward to August 31st, 2010. And this is when the shooting occurred at Big Vanilla. This note said, Carrie Truelove, we're out and we found you, York boys. We love CSI.
When they said out, did they mean like of the closet?
They didn't clarify, but when they said, instead of you...
That would be fabulous. I would celebrate that.
But instead of saying YOU, they just put you. And instead of love for we love CSI, they put LUV.
I hate it when people are lazy with text messaging.
Now, this report notes that Carrie identified her dad again as a possible suspect, and in this shooting, there was at least 5 shots fired into the building. It broke a glass door, and like the first shooting where Carrie and her husband and her mom and stepdad were home when somebody fired into the house, this building was occupied at the time that it was shot into. The cleaning crew was there cleaning. Now, nobody was injured or worse, but this obviously illustrates a reckless and wanton disregard for human life. So that shooting occurred August 31st, 2010. And then, not quite a month later, on September 21st, 2010, 2 bottles of gasoline were left outside Big Vanilla with the word Truelove spray painted between the 2 bottles on the ground. Let's talk about some points here that I think are important.
Like the ones on my head?
Let's just talk about the ones I wrote down, and then we can talk about any other points you want to later. 1. Crawford was listed as a suspect in a shooting that took place when a building was occupied while he was the police chief in Laurel. Number 2. In several instances, Crawford left gasoline or may have dumped out gasoline on scene because in a couple of the instances where gasoline cans were found, police surmised that perhaps gasoline had been poured around the area, but it was raining in all of those instances. So we don't know if there was multiple instances where maybe he was starting to commit an arson and got scared off, or he was just, working up to committing arson. Number 3. We see a repeated theme of reckless and wanton disregard for the lives of people and innocent bystanders. He's fired into a home where his daughter and her family were sleeping. He fired into an occupied gym building, and when he missed the stepfather's car, he was firing into a completely innocent bystander's home. So, I know he wasn't aiming for it, but that's what he did.
Did he have to... Okay, this is probably a tangent, so bear with me.
Alright.
I understand that if you're a police officer, whether you're a sheriff's deputy or a local policeman or whatever, sheriff's or a state trooper or whatever, you have to meet qualifications for marksmanship. So if you're a police chief, do you actually have to qualify?
I think yes, because I'll tell you why. I remember in some of the documents that I have that it was commented that these people hadn't seen Crawford in a long time except for at recertification events. And I assumed, I believe, because I don't have documents in front of me to check, but I assumed that they meant police marksmanship recertification, but I don't know for sure. So I'd have to go check, but I think that they do, but I can ask the question because I have lots of contacts now that I can ask questions of.
It just seems to me unlikely that someone who is a professional, that's supposed to be some kind of marksman, right, would miss a whole car.
It does seem that way, unless you consider that the person was driving at the time that they shot, according to...
Oh, he was moving?
Some theories. Now, we don't have proof of that, but that's the working theory, that he was firing from a moving vehicle.
It was a drive-by?
It may have been a drive-by.
Oh, homie.
Don't know for sure it was a drive-by.
Are you sure it wasn't the York boys perpetrating this drive-by? Because that sounds like something a gang member would do, not an upstanding citizen, you know.
I can't
someone
prove either way.
Is a leader in the community that you would rely on and trust.
I can't prove either way.
Fair enough.
But I think that this reckless and wanton disregard for the lives of innocent bystanders is something that we need to keep in the back of our head, because we're actually going to be talking about this point later when we talk about some of the charges against him in Howard County.
Well, that could be the difference between a manslaughter or a murder, right?
That could be the difference between a reckless burning or an arson charge and a attempted murder charge.
That's what I suspected.
Exactly. That's why we're going to come back to it. You're so smart.
I'm really an idiot, but this is fun.
All right. And number 4 is the threat of arson before he began his arson spree, like the pouring out of gasoline or leaving behind these gas cans. And then after this harassment stops, we see he actually begins an arson spree. So is that maybe an escalation? We see a lot of serial criminals escalate. So there's that potential consideration there that maybe he never did intend to commit arson at these, but was working up his gumption and then later graduated to arson.
It sounds like a really twisted coming-of-age story.
It is. And then the 5th point is, and I cannot corroborate this, so if you can, crimetoburn@gmail.com. I can keep you anonymous if you wish, but I heard from one of my sources that the arsonist also left a spray-painted message outside of one of the Justin Sherstrom fires, but I could not find it in the arrest warrant, I couldn't find it in the court records, I couldn't find it in any of the press reports I had, so if you can corroborate this, crimetoburn@gmail.com.
Where did you find it?
One of my sources told me that was the case, but I need to corroborate it, because while I'm not saying I don't trust my source, they were told this information. They didn't see it with their own eyes. So
some dark hearsay.
Yeah, so I believe it's possible, but it wasn't presented in court. And if it wasn't presented in court, I'm curious why. And so I need to know if it's true or not.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah. That's the rundown of the timeline of the harassment that occurred in Maryland of Carrie. Now, we discussed last week that Crawford showed up at one of the crime scenes involving Carrie, but I have a source that tells me that they were informed, so this is not corroborated, that he actually showed up at more than one of those crime scenes and attempted to insert himself into those investigations. So if you have information to corroborate that, again, crimetoburn@gmail.com. But I do trust the source that gave me this information, because other information they gave me I was able to corroborate. So I think that while I can't confirm this, that it's not rumor, I think it's definitely possible. And we're going to find out as we go through the arson cases that he has a history of intentionally inserting himself into investigations after his crimes. So this may end up being a repeating pattern if it's true. Now, what I had suspected all along, and then one of these new sources that reached out to me also alleged, without me asking or suggesting it, was that because Crawford was named as a suspect in these harassment cases, which included shootings, that's actually the real reason that Laurel was going to dismiss him as chief, but they allowed him to retire. However, my initial source that told me that he was being let go for performance reasons, I reached back out to them because I wanted to tell them, look, I've got this new information and I want to see if you're willing to comment on it. Is this true? They haven't gotten back to me yet, but if they do, I will share what they tell me. There was also speculation, and again, this is just speculation and not fact, that perhaps the police maybe hadn't worked super hard to tie Dave to these allegations of harassment because of the potential can of worms that could open up by calling into question any of the convictions that he procured while he was the chief of police. So it seems like this person that I was talking to suggested that the police intentionally focused only on fires that occurred after he retired, and my source was wondering out loud if by focusing on the fires that occurred after he retired, this sort of gave Laurel a little bit of a cushion to say that he became this criminal after he was done serving in his role as police chief. But I feel like there's strong enough question here that Laurel, you may have hired a psychopath and given him a gun and a badge.
And it may not be the first time
And
or the last time.
District Heights and PG County did the same thing, so you ain't alone. But it did make me wonder if there might be any other unsolved fires with similar MOs that occurred before that first fire we talked about that police just didn't include. I have no proof of this, but it's a question that's rattling around in my brain. On the other hand, if we look at his going from the harassment and leaving gasoline on the scene to lighting cars on fire and then to lighting garages on fire, we could also see it as an escalation pattern, which is not uncommon in serial cases. So it is possible that he actually didn't graduate to arsonist before his police career ended. But I feel like there's a strong enough question as to whether or not he was engaging in criminal activity before his police career ended that could definitely call a lot of his activities as police chief in question.
Competence, benevolence, chivalry. These are the things we need in a police force.
Honesty.
That's nice, too.
And maybe fewer psychopaths.
Well, don't be too choosy. It's one little step at a time.
Okay, and the last thing I want to share before we move on with the next fire is I was curious how long that Carrie had lived with Dave and Mary after Dave's heart attack. Because remember, the press report said that she'd moved in with him. But I had a source that I rely on, I feel like we can trust this information, although I haven't been able to corroborate it, that said that it wasn't really a moved-in situation, it was more of an extended visit situation. So that it was just for a couple of weeks after Dave had the bypass surgery that he had to have after his heart attack. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense to me, but that they didn't, it's not like she moved in and changed her address and lived there for an extended period of time.
Just helping out, right?
Yeah. So, all right, so let's get back to that list, shall we?
Yes.
Yes, we're done with history now. All right, so the list found in David Crawford's phone, it was a coded list, and this is exactly what the list said. Josh Gates, Martin, Mark, Price, Hawkins, Scott, Justin 3, McLaughlin, Cairo, White Privilege, Evelyn 2.
So groceries. It's a grocery list.
I see no groceries on this list.
Well, there's 3 of that one thing.
Justin.
3 of Justin.
That would refer to Justin Sherstrom, Dave's stepson, who had 3 fires, if you recall. It's the name of his victims.
And he had it in his pocket?
In his phone.
He made a list of his victims in his phone and then included how many times he assaulted them? For what, posterity?
I think that the way that you feel right now is pretty much exactly the way investigators felt when they found the list. This guy was a police chief.
That's some clinical right there. That's nuts.
Is that narcissism, thinking that you're so clever you're never going to be caught?
That's narcissism on steroids and methamphetamines. That's a f***ing speed run into what the f***.
Now, the first name on this alleged hit list is Josh Gates, and we have not discussed him yet. And the fact is that Josh Gates did not suffer a fire, but like Mark Kratzer, police had reason to believe that he was one of Crawford's next intended victims. Why? Well, because Dave Crawford had conducted multiple searches of Josh Gates's address in much the same manner that we're about to find out he'd done for the actual victims of the arsons he's accused of. And so who was this person, Josh Gates, to the defendant? I have no idea, but I do know who he was to the world at large. He's the host of the Discovery show Expedition Unknown. Now, I have not listened yet to the closing arguments, but I have listened to all the testimony so far. And I can tell you that I am horrifically disappointed that the prosecution does not tell us what Josh Gates did to piss off David Crawford. And so if you know the answer to this question, for the love of jelly beans, send me an email at crimetoburn@gmail.com, because I am dying to know, and I will lay awake at night for months wondering what the answer to this question is.
At this point, I'm willing to believe that he just insulted his taint or something.
Well, in court testimony, the detective that testified to the information about Josh Gates that was found on Dave Crawford's computers indicated that In addition to having his name on the hit list, the defendant had information about Josh Gates, including photos of Josh Gates, photos of the set of a second show that Josh Gates began during COVID called Josh Gates Tonight. And Dave Crawford reportedly also had some, just photos and films of Josh Gates. And the prosecution asked, some questions to sort of ascertain who Josh Gates was. The detective bafflingly testified to the fact that Josh Gates' shows deals with things like historic religious occurrences, like he went on a quest to find the Ark of the Covenant, and does research into findings in ancient Egypt kinds of things. But they never tell us what he may have done to piss off David Crawford, and this is a source of daily irritation for me. So please, somebody put me out of my misery and explain this to me. Please. So detectives testified that on November 19th of 2020, there were 14 records of web searches on the defendant's phone related to Josh Gates. Now, we've talked about the second name on the list already. The second name on the list was Martin. This refers to Martin Fleming. He was the first in the series of fires we discussed, where the defendant allegedly lit 2 vehicles and his own pants and shoe on fire. The third name on the list is Mark Kratzer. This is the half-brother of Crawford. He hosted the pool party after Scott's pool was burned. We already know that he did not have a fire, but we know that the defendant had done the same kind of recon on Mark's home that he has done for his other victims. In addition, he did multiple searches of Kratzer's home, and he manipulated those map searches dozens of times, and finally they found photos of Kratzer's home that Crawford had taken from all different angles, from different streets, and they were all taken in the wee hours of the morning, when I feel like the majority of people would be unlikely to be out photographing the homes of estranged family members. And then, of course, he also added Kratzer's name to the list. So putting all this together, police assert that Kratzer was about to be a victim of Crawford's little arson spree. Alleged little arson spree.
That allegedly stands to reason.
So the next name on the list is Price. So who was Price? Price refers to Clark Price, who is more commonly known as Bud Price. Price was a career cop with a 37-year law enforcement career, and he met David Crawford way back in 1975 when Crawford joined the Prince George's County Police Department.
That's a year before I was born.
That was a long time ago. Now, Price testified that the two of them worked together for nearly 25 years. However, Bud Price was always in a supervisory role over David Crawford, and David Crawford was always in a role that was subordinate to him. He didn't always report directly to Bud Price, but they never carried equal rank.
Based on this guy's personality profile, that must have just grated on him.
Now, I gotta tell you, I got to listen to Bud Price's testimony, and he seems like the kind of guy that is just a no-nonsense, cut to the chase. Some people would probably think of his responses as very terse, and I don't know if he was just kind of annoyed about being there or he just doesn't like small talk, but he seems like a word economy, straight to the point, no-nonsense guy, and there's something about the way he testified and how annoyed he sounded that just made me really like him.
Yeah, well, yeah. Smart people tend to be a little bit aggravated with the world at large, right?
he seemed, and granted, he was a victim of an arson, so I can understand why he would be aggravated to get there, but I kind of got the feeling, which obviously is not substantiated, that he was just a, very, I don't get the impression he's the guy who's going to stop by your desk to ask how your weekend was. I got the impression that he would have been good morning, and just kept on walking. That's the kind of impression I got from him.
Well, maybe you cared about your weekend, but you didn't care about your feelings about your weekend.
Maybe that. I don't know.
There's a difference.
David Crawford was always in a role that would have been subordinate to the role that Price was in. David did not always report directly to Price, though. At one point, Price was Dave's commander. Now, when Price made deputy chief, Crawford was moved up to captain. However, I did not realize this until Price testified. So Crawford wasn't a line officer when he worked for Prince George's County.
What's a line officer?
That's a great question. I'd love to tell you. So Crawford's role was administrative. He supervised civilian employees. He oversaw records functions, which is ironic since Prince George's County still hasn't responded to my records requests.
Well, that's how desperate they were for help.
had responsibilities for making sure things got filed appropriately, and for managing fiscal affairs and all other kinds of non-police work duties. But he was not a line officer, so he wasn't out there like arresting people and throwing them in jail.
Was it like a secretary? Or?
It seems secretary-ish. Like when I was in the fire department, we had line officers. Those were your commanding officers on a fire scene, and then we had staff officers, and they were responsible for like running the firehouse. Anyway, Price testified that twice he had promotional opportunities that he could have considered Crawford for, and neither time did he recommend Crawford. And he said it was no secret that he did not recommend Crawford. Now, Price testified that in 1998, so this is a long time ago, Crawford had rejected a leave request from one of his female subordinates, and she was threatening to file a grievance over it. So Price got dragged into this conversation as a superior officer, and he had a meeting with Crawford and some others to discuss the situation. And at the end of the meeting, Price testified that he basically just told Crawford he would be granting the leave request, and then he allegedly left Crawford very agitated and upset, which is a characterization that was quickly objected to by the defense and overruled by the judge, because he testified that it was his impression and not it was David's state of mind. I know from bench conferences that happened around Price's testimony that the prosecution was trying to show that Crawford was not ever happy at anyone, even his superior officers, bossing him around. That was what they were trying to show. I don't know that the jury necessarily got that. All they really got was that there was a really old fight between Price and Crawford in which Price overruled Crawford, and it made Crawford mad.
The people who would have had the potential to intimidate this dude or make him feel inferior or what, they didn't get attacked, did they? Only people that he already felt were inferior to himself.
I don't know that he ever felt anyone was superior to him.
Then why didn't those people who were his superiors, I'm using air quotes, why didn't those people get attacked? Why was it only people who he might have considered to be less than?
Price was his superior. He was Crawford's superior. He overruled a decision Crawford made. And the prosecution was trying to show with his testimony that Crawford could not handle somebody overruling his opinions, even if it was a superior officer.
Did he blow up his car or something?
He set his house on fire, which we're about to get to.
He set his okay.
Now, Price was vacating the position that he filled as the bureau chief, and Crawford, being a commander beneath him, may have felt like he was owed the position when Price retired, or vacated the position. I don't know that he was retiring then. But instead of promoting Crawford, Price chose to civilianize the position so that he could promote a woman that he felt was better qualified, a civilian woman, into that administrative role over Crawford. So this would have put Crawford reporting to a woman.
What, you think he's a misogynist?
I do. So Price promoted a civilian woman to a position
Sounds diabolical. A civilian woman.
That Crawford apparently thought he was next in line for, potentially, allegedly. So, yeah, make of that what you will. And life goes on. Crawford leaves PG, goes to District Heights, and then to Laurel, and all seem to be going just fine for Mr. Bud Price until April 3rd, 2018. So on April 3rd, 2018, Price and his wife were awoken at 3:40 a.m. by someone yelling and banging on their door. This man had been a passerby on his way to work and noticed that Price's garage was on fire. So Price calls 911, and he runs to the garage and opens the door between the garage and the house because his wife's cat apparently sleeps in the garage, and his wife is freaking out about her cat. So he's met with thick, dark smoke. And he said when he opened the garage door, he could see that the left front corner of the garage was on fire and the flames were extending up into the ceiling. So he hits the garage door buttons to open the doors so that if the cat's in the garage, it can run out. And it does. The cat's fine, everyone. The cat is fine.
That's a lot of emergency thinking.
So he goes and gets some towels and blankets and attempts to smother the fire while the fire department is en route. And I gotta ask you, Mr. Price, where was your fire extinguisher? Why are we using towels and blankets? on a fire above our head.
That's not fair.
Okay.
Just because we have a fire extinguisher in like every room. And I would like to add, that's not even your choice. I did that.
You did.
Not everyone thinks like me. You can't expect them to be so awesome as to think like me.
Mr. Price, if you're listening and you don't have a fire extinguisher, send me an email at crimetoburn@gmail.com and I will Amazon you a fire extinguisher. And you know what? He may have had one and just wasn't. Like in emergency situations, you know, like sometimes people don't do the most. Like he may have seen a pile of blankets right there next to him and he would have had to go back in the house to get the fire extinguisher and decided that he could probably smother out the little bit of fire that was in the garage with a blanket. I don't know. I wasn't there. He's trying to smother out the fire with these towels and blankets. When the fire department arrives, they put out the fire. And Price and the fire department look around the garage to find out what could have caused the fire, and they initially decide that a straw broom had fallen over onto a automatic overhead door motion sensor, and that it probably caused a short. We're gonna come back to that theory, so stand by.
One time we had a guy doing something in our attic, and he fell through the ceiling of it and caused a short in our garage door.
I didn't know he caused a short.
It was more like a complete disconnection of the circuit by boot.
By entire lower body, really.
Yeah, it was a little bit humorous because I sort of predicted it.
You did.
I was like, this is how people fall through the ceiling, and like 2 seconds later, boom, feet.
That is true. That is exactly how it happened. He was a nice guy, though.
He was super sweet. He had a lot of drywall mud where did he get all that?
I don't know.
I've never seen anyone use that much drywall mud at once. That was amazing. I don't even know how it stuck there. Like, it seems like
to fight gravity.
Yeah.
All right. So again, Price thinks that this broom is the cause of his fire. Later that morning, Price makes a post to a private Facebook group that he's a member of for retired cops. And he tells everyone about the fire. And he tells them about the broom theory. That day, David Crawford, who is apparently also a member of this group, responds, but doesn't respond to the post. He actually sends Price a message directly. So Dave Crawford responds to this post, and at this point, Price indicates that he hadn't talked to Crawford in 18 years. Now, several people commented on the post, and Price had said they talked about photos. I don't know if people had asked for photos or Price had said he was going to post photos, but he gets this message from Dave. It says, "Bud, can you send me those pictures also? I need to check my garage and inventory what I'm storing. Scary stuff. I'm pleasantly surprised you were able to determine the cause so quickly. Your fire department must be crackerjack good, to say the least. P.S. Who's riding around at 4 a.m.? Lucky you."
That's some diabolical shit, man.
Now, Bud indicates that while the fire department was there, he had not put the garage doors back down since opening them to let the cat out of the garage. Again, the cat was fine. Once he did, he noticed that there was fire and smoke damage to the exterior of the garage doors, all along the bottom of all 3 garage doors on the outside. And he realized that if the cat had knocked over the broom onto the door sensor the way that they had thought, there would be no way for the fire to jump from door to door, because between each of these garage doors was a stone wall. So garage door, stone. Garage door, stone. Garage door, stone along the outside.
So you would need to add some kind of fuel,
combustible material,
right?
For the fire to chase.
Yeah.
So Bud recognizes that something's off. So he calls the fire department and asks them to send a superior officer back to have a look. Well, the superior officer calls him back and says, "Hey, we're going to send the fire marshal over." Apparently it's like Friday night or Thursday late or whatever, and the fire marshal isn't allowed to work overtime.
I'm sorry. Is the fire marshal in a union? Or?
I don't know. Apparently the county won't pay overtime. So the fire marshal didn't actually come out until either Monday or Tuesday the following week. But as soon as the fire marshal showed up, he says that he knew something was wrong, that there's no way this fire could have jumped from door to door. I
don't mean to clown. I'm from a rural firefighting team. Like, I was never in a fancy firefighting outfit. I was just a volunteer.
Yeah.
Very rurally.
So the fire marshal testified. He said, yes, something didn't seem right. And he talked about that there didn't seem to be any possible way for the fire to jump across the brick or stone that was at the bottom of the wall to go from door to door without a combustible material for the fire to follow. So he examined the door sensor, and there's also an electrical outlet adjacent to this door sensor, and he determined that there was no damage to the door sensor or the electrical outlet that appeared to make it look like there had been any kind of short. There was no evidence of sparking or arcing. There was no melted conductors.
No surface carbon on reset covers or whatever.
So he calls for an accelerant detection canine to come to the scene.
Oh.
So the dog gets there, and the dog alerts to the possible presence of an accelerant at the base of the garage doors. So he collects a piece of evidence from the bottom of each of the 3 garage doors, packages them up to be sent off to the lab for testing, and he preliminarily rules the fire as incendiary.
I'm a huge skeptic, but those are the goodest boys.
Actually, so arson detection dogs can only alert to the possible presence of an accelerant. You can't actually use the fact that an arson dog hit in an area to say that there's definitely an accelerant. It has to be backed up by the lab, because there are things that can trick the dog into believing that there's an accelerant there.
But that's why you use a pointer or whatever.
Yeah.
It gives you an indication. It's not
It gives you an idea of where you need to take evidence collection from. That's what they use them for.
Right. Which is actually more handy than one might imagine.
Oh, yeah. Because if you take evidence from the wrong place and you just happen to miss the spot,
Yeah.
So the dogs are helpful for that. So he collected 3 pieces of evidence, sent it off to the lab, and the lab tested them and found that they tested positive, all 3 of them, for the presence of gasoline. And the fire marshal officially ruled this fire incendiary. Now, who wants to get science nerdy and find out how they test for gasoline or accelerants in evidence collection?
Your friends do. I'm going to go get another beer.
I think that the evidence collection and forensics is super interesting, but I get that not everyone is as nerdy as I am, so I'm going to go through a high-level summary. But if you guys want to really discuss the science of this type of evidence collection, you can DM me and I will talk about it. I just don't want to lose all the non-nerds. So they take some material off the bottom of the garage door, and they typically use a paint can for accelerant detection because the cans are vapor tight. They seal it with evidence tape. They document all the pertinent information on it for chain of custody and transport it to the crime lab to be analyzed. Now at the crime lab, they put an absorbent strip into the can with the material. And I think it was kind of interesting the way that somebody asked in court how they did that. So they take a magnet and put it on the top of the can, and they stick a paper clip to the bottom of the lid under where the magnet is to hold it, and they use that to hold the absorbent material. The lid back on the can.
It's very scientific.
Very scientific. In fact, she even jokingly said in court, she was like, it's very high-tech. High-tech paperclip. Anyway, then they take this can, and so now that it's got the strip in it, it's ready to go into the oven. But they have to do 2 more cans. First of all, they have to do a negative control and a positive control. If the negative control comes back with traces of accelerant in it, they know they've contaminated their evidence. And if the positive control comes back without evidence of accelerants in it, they know that their machines aren't working. So they do a negative and a positive control. All the cans are resealed. They go into an oven for 14 hours. Why? Accelerants and volatile liquids off-gas. However, after a fire, most of those vapors have already off-gassed, and we're just looking for trace amounts of vapors. So anytime you take a material like an accelerant and you heat it up, it off-gasses more. So this is the best way to get any trace amounts of that flammable liquid to vaporize so that it can be absorbed by that little strip in there. So they actually put it in the oven for like 14 hours. And they have to take it out, wait for the can to completely cool down. They take that strip off. They cut the strip in half. They put half of the strip into a vial and seal it up again so that if the evidence ever has to be retested, they have the strip that is unmarred that they can retest. The other strip they put into another vial with an inert liquid that will wash the accelerant traces out of this strip and into this liquid so that it can then be inserted into a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, which will identify all of the components of any trace materials that have vaporized in the can and been absorbed by this strip. And they can compare the output to known accelerants to determine if there's a trace of accelerant. And in this case, all 3 of the pieces of evidence, which were in 3 separate cans, tested positive for gasoline.
That's really complicated.
It is, but I thought it was really interesting.
But it seems to satisfy double jeopardy, so... Because after you burn that second bit of evidence by opening it, it's over, right? Like, what do you got after that? There's no tertiary evidence after that, right?
No, anytime they test it, they'll cut the strip in half. So it just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But typically, they don't even need to use the second half of the strip.
Are you talking about how you can divide something infinitely and then ultimately all they have is one molecule of the strip left and they're still trying to prove a case in sometime in like 3,000 years in the future? That is a dismal.
I don't think that's probably ever happened, but I mean, I don't know how many times they would cut the strip in half until it's just not useful anymore.
Well, theoretically, you could do it forever.
So, thanks for hanging in there, all you non-nerds.
And my people, too.
And my husband's people.
Which are also not non-nerds.
But how do we know that it was David Crawford? Because so far, all we have is Price's name is on a list on an iPhone, and there is some gasoline on the garage door. Well, forensic computer nerds show up again in court, and they explain that in January of 2018, before this fire took place, the defendant searched this address, and then the resulting map that popped up, he manipulated 125 separate times. So, like, every time he, like, panned around the map or, like, went further down the street or whatever in Street View, it would have generated another result. They were able to see that he did that 125 times.
Think about that next time you use Google Earth.
He also had a lot of map data for this address, and he had conducted a Spokio search for Price. A Spokio search is like a people search website. And then in February, he also went back and did the map thing again and continued his efforts to thoroughly map the area, this time with 98 separate manipulations of the map. And if that doesn't convince you, there is also the search on his iPad for news in Jefferson, Maryland and Frederick, Maryland related to a fire. Now, the problem is the prosecution believes that this search was made right after the fire. But because the search was deleted, they were able to retrieve the search terms, but apparently the data that would have stored the time and date of the search had been overwritten already, and so they weren't able to retrieve that. But we'll see that the defendant has a habit in other fires of searching for fire news before he allegedly could have found out about the fire through other methods.
He's just a very curious party.
Yeah, just wants to see if his friend's house is burned down overnight.
I mean, it's a natural thought process. Everyone wants to wonder what will happen in that scenario.
So that is the Price entry on the list. The next name on the list is Hawkins. This is Alfonso Hawkins of Charles County of Waldorf, close to where you and I used to live a long, long time ago.
I used to go to Waldorf and eat some food.
And he was also an arson victim, and we're going to get into the fire that occurred at his home on the next episode of Crime to Burn.
I can't wait. I'm genuinely interested.
So that's 8 fires out of 12 that we've now covered.
Oh, this is awkward.
I don't think anyone's probably recorded with chainmail on before. Zulu.
Sorry, that's me.
Zulu's got a bag somewhere.
Just licking my own bag.
Zulu, where are you?
I feel dialed in. I'm locked in for this episode.
The dog is not dialed in.
I'm inspired. That was a bug.
Did you just inhale a bug?
Like almost. It was right on the precipice of my nostril. I am a turkey. Baste me. Let's just raw dog it in there. Jesus Christ. Do 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 ding dong songs here.
I don't even know where I was. I've been derailed by duty.
I'm a court jester.
You're something. Your chainmail's crooked and it's bothering me. Do 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 do. Do do do. I don't want to say that like that. in a multifamily dwelling. Oh my God, what is she doing?
Falling over the coffee table? Are you injured? Are you injured? Are we gonna have to hog tie you?
Just try not to move furniture, please.
Try not to breathe! Don't drop feathers! Oh man, you give me the disappointed look.
How did we get such an echoey house? I mean, it sounds like...
I think we bought it that way. And then I added these sound treatments to knock it down a little bit.
At this point, we're going to have to apply sound treatments to the child herself.
Like duct tape?
And the dog with her.
When it comes to sound treatments and children, duct tape. Shh. Goose Fagua. What the f*** is wrong with you?
I don't know. Do we have any moonshine
Do
left?
we need to go do something weird or like... Speaking of interrupting...
I cannot even fathom a guess.
The lap dance is better when the stripper is crying.
Oh dear God, you found your people.
You will. We're going to have some fondue.
I like cheese.
Mm-hmm. You got to let that kind of thing peter out.
All right.
It's not going to stop on its own.
In case anyone's wondering, Chad has a new friend. It's a skeleton. We're calling him Skinny Chad. Did he steal my Beats sticker? I have a Primetime Crime sticker.
Where'd that come from?
Primetime Crime.
Who's that?
Kylie.
Who's Kylie?
She's a podcaster. Now Zulu's gonna take over the noise making.
That love each other very much?
Nope.
Take a poll. I bet they love each other very much.
I don't want to ask them about their husband's polls. This has gone off the rails. I can't even use this for blooper reel. We've gone so far off the rails.
Let me consult my notes.
Most people, when they say, let me consult my notes, pull up a notebook. Not you.
Wait, what?
Most people,
I can't understand anything you're saying.
Most people, when they say, let me consult my notes, they pull up a notebook or like their phone. You just pulled a whiteboard out of where? Where were you hiding that?
This is what I do. I told you. What episode was it that we said we were going to get a whiteboard?
I think we said it in several. But
I got one now.
Not expecting you to be like, let me consult my notes and pull a whiteboard out of the ether.
Hey.
Hey.
If you weren't aware, the people around you aren't figments of your imagination.
That guy is.
So try not to be a douche.
Uh-oh. An evil spirit. Oh no, the cat. The cat's the evil spirit. I was like, an evil spirit just moved that broom.
There's two cats.
Apparently they're working together. Oh, it's gonna fall. I'm unrailed.
I feel like that's a cop-out. You know what I feel like we need for the podcast?
So many.
A long, drawn-out sigh. We need a shame bell.
Like
like one I can, manhandle a bit.
Man, I'll Google that manhandle belt. Oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't Google that.
Don't Google that.
Yeah.
Shame! I'm serious.
Nobody jokes in chainmail. I'm in a... Bleh. Good God.
It occurred in Bleh, good God.
So much. Bleh.
So many things occur in Bleh, good God.
Okay.
Are they titties?
No. The dog's quiet. If you guys hear banging around, it's because we have a child, and she has legs that we have not removed from her.
Or hobbled. Yeah, but he masturbates to Pat Sajak, and I don't think she does.
Oh, dear God. This whole episode is just completely off the rails.
You know what?
Nope.
Untuck your butthole.
At one point, Price what?
This interruption is brought to you by Dog Dreams. I'm sorry, I was locked in on that. He looked like a emerging demon on the couch or something.
We can't even remember who we are, man.
Don't you just want to trust anyone named Bud? Is she chanting with monks? Non-nerds unite. I'm using my falsetto voice. Let's go. I don't know how amusing you are.
You don't think I'm amusing?
No, you're like a beige throw pillow. Are you trying to say I'm a hottie? You don't think?
I don't think people could even hallucinate those.
Well, I've been told that I live in another dimension.
I mean,
Right.
I don't feel unsafe. We'll stand skinny Chad out there and we'll just hurl flip-flops at his head. He does have nice posture.
I don't know. I always saw Target as some kind of like sad, quasi-utopian, waspy place. Like, it doesn't really...
It's my people. My beige throw pillows are there.
Whatever isn't an asshole gives us hope for humanity. What is it? I feel like I'm leaving myself Morse code from the past. I was in such a good mood that I thought maybe Bono isn't an asshole. Nothing I said is going to end up on the editing floor this week.